Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Global. We'll get you top stories from India and the region. I'm Tanvi Taneja, and for news from the rest of the world, I'm joined by my colleague in London, Julia Chapman.
Thanks, Tanvi. Coming up, Morocco is hit by aftershocks as rescue efforts from the earthquake continue. The UK expresses concern about Chinese interference, and Joe Biden wraps up his visit to Vietnam. But first, the headlines.
North Korean Supremo Kim Jong-un arrives in Russia to meet President Putin. Arms deal likely on the agenda. Death toll in Morocco earthquake reaches over 2,800. The nation calls for more global aid. In showdown, top Israeli court convenes its entire 15-judge bench for the first time in history to hear arguments against the controversial reasonable bill. And over 2,000 people killed and at least 10,000 missing in Libya after Strom Danial causes devastating floods in the eastern parts of the North African country. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is on a visit to Russia for a comprehensive discussion with President Vladimir Putin. Kim's visit comes amid Washington's warning against any arms deal between Pyongyang and Moscow in the wake of the Ukraine war.
Attracting much global attention, a private train carrying North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, accompanied by arms industry and military officials, arrived in Russia's Far East on Tuesday. Kim's visit is reportedly to advance an arms deal to provide Moscow with weapons for the Ukraine war. Meanwhile, the West, especially the US, seems apprehensive about the meeting between the North Korean Supremo and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Washington has threatened to impose sanctions if North Korea decides to go ahead with an arms deal with Moscow.
We're going to monitor very closely the outcome of this meeting. I will remind both countries that any transfer of arms from North Korea to Russia would be in violation of multiple United Nations Security Council resolutions. And we, of course, have aggressively enforced our sanctions against entities that fund Russia's war effort, and we will continue to enforce those sanctions and will not hesitate to impose new sanctions if appropriate.
Meanwhile, South Korea is closely monitoring the Kim-Putin meeting.
The Ministry of National Defense believes that Kim Jong-un probably entered Russia early this morning. In particular, considering the large number of military personnel traveling with him, we are closely watching whether negotiations on arms trade and technology transfer between North Korea and Russia will possibly proceed.
The Kremlin has agreed to give South Korea, which is an important trading partner, details of Kim's planned visit to Russia if Seoul requests for such information. As global interest peaks, Russia claims that Kim and Putin will only discuss bilateral relationships and regional and global issues. They also reiterate that the interests of countries are important and not war. Abhishek Bose for DD India.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has said that the multipolar world offers new models of relations and integration. Speaking at the Eastern Economic Forum, he said that Russia and its Far East are open for trade.
Our trade with ATR countries and economic relations in general will continue developing as Russia and our Far East are open for trade, cooperative ties. And potential of such cooperation is impossible to overestimate.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has said that Ukraine will enter peace talks only when its resources are exhausted. Speaking at the Eastern Economic Forum in Vladivostok, Putin further said that 1,000 to 1,500 Russians were signing voluntary contracts to join the military every day. Referring to the prosecution against former US President Donald Trump, Putin said criminal cases against Trump indicate the fundamental corruption in the United States.
Sorry, as for Trump prosecution, what's going on in present circumstances is very good for us because it shows the rottenness of the US political system that can't claim to teach others democracy. What happens to Trump is politically motivated prosecution of a US political rival.
India is being lauded for its successful G20 summit held here in New Delhi over the weekend. The event was attended by world leaders with a joint declaration adopted.
We absolutely believe it was a success. The G20 is a big organization. Russia is a member of the G20. China is a member of the G20. There are members that have a diverse range of views. We believe the fact that that organization was able to issue a statement that calls for respecting the territorial integrity and sovereignty and saying that those principles should not be violated is an extremely important statement because that is exactly what is at heart of Russia's full invasion of Ukraine. It is those very questions. So we thought that was an incredibly important statement for them to make. You also saw important announcements made at the G20 about new economic arrangements between Saudi Arabia and India that the United States was a part of.
Is good for all of the participants at first, and I think India did a lot about this G20, and the organization was very nice and very good organization. I have also to salute all of the Indians under the command of Prime Minister Mr. Modi, who did a very great meeting.
It has been one of the very successful experiences for us. We have learned a lot. We have seen participation from so many of our ministries. I think, and you have seen in the news, it wasn't an easy task for the Indian government to reach to a consensus, but successfully, with all the experience they have over these years, they were able to reach to, and I think that shows that the whole world is really thinking similarly when it comes to the challenges that facing the world now.
Great success, and I congratulate the Indian government and the Indian authorities for the organization of such a successful summit. Really very important, the declaration adopted over the weekend. So I think it's gone very well. It's very important to ever expand G20 to include as many of the developing world as possible, and everyone, frankly, because the issues which are being discussed and dealt and agreed upon certainly impact all of humanity.
Next, India global news of Morocco. Rescue operations continue with search teams from Britain, Spain and Qatar assisting the Moroccan military, but hope of finding survivors is fading. My colleague Julia Chapman is in London. She gives us more on this and other stories making it to the headlines around the world. Let's go over to Julia now.
Rescue operations are continuing in Morocco after it was hit by the deadliest earthquake in more than 6 decades on Friday. More than 2,800 people have died so far in the devastated North African country. Heavy equipment is being used to search for survivors, and a large number of military personnel are working at disaster-affected areas. As Morocco continues to struggle with aftershocks, residents have been left homeless and have been spending the night outside. Reports suggest it may take several years to repair the damage caused by this earthquake. Meanwhile, rescue teams from Britain and Spain have joined the Moroccan workers to help the country deal with the aftermath of the 6.8 magnitude earthquake. People have been struggling to hold funerals for the victims because of the damage, and bodies are still being pulled out of the rubble. The United Nations Secretary General has expressed his condolences to the victims of the Moroccan earthquake. Addressing the media, a spokesperson reiterated the UN's readiness to assist the government of Morocco in its rescue and relief efforts.
We reiterate our readiness to assist the government of Morocco in its efforts to assist the impacted population. Road blockages and difficult geographic conditions have made it challenging to conduct search and rescue interventions. Many people, fearing additional aftershocks, have sought refuge outdoors. Civil protection units have been deployed to increase stocks and blood banks and ensure the supply of vital resources, including water, food, tents and blankets, to affected areas. Moroccan Red Crescent teams continue to respond on the ground, providing first aid, psychosocial support, and helping transport the injured to hospitals.
British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says he raised the issue of Chinese interference during a meeting with Chinese Premier Li Qiang at the G20 summit. During a statement to the House of Commons, Rishi Sunak said when he met the Chinese premier in New Delhi, he told him that any attempted spying is completely unacceptable and will never be tolerated. It's emerged that 2 people were arrested in the UK on suspicion of spying for China, one of whom has been identified as a parliamentary researcher in the British Parliament. China has dismissed the UK's spying allegations as malicious slander.
But with regard to my meeting with Vice Premier Li, what I said very specifically is that I raised a range of different concerns that we have in areas of disagreement, and in particular, my very strong concerns about any interference in our parliamentary democracy, which is obviously unacceptable. Well, as I said, we discussed a range of things, and I raised areas where there are disagreements, and this is just part of our strategy to protect ourselves, protect our values and our interests, to align our approach to China with that of our allies like America, Australia, Canada, Japan and others, but also to engage where it makes sense. And actually, I think the right thing to do is take the opportunity to engage, to raise concerns specifically, rather than just shouting from the sidelines.
The United States may soon approve the shipment of longer-range missiles packed with cluster bombs to Ukraine. The missiles would boost Ukraine's counter-offensive efforts, giving it the ability to cause significant damage deeper within Russian-occupied territory. With Ukraine's push against Russian forces showing progress, the Biden administration is keen to boost the capabilities of the Ukrainian military. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has urged his countrymen to stay focused on defending the country as Russia's war in Ukraine enters its 18th month.
When parts of our country are relatively calm and quiet, we must always keep in mind that part of our land, our cities and villages that are almost constantly under fire. Even though today is the 565th day of this war, we all, each and every one of us in Ukraine, must be focused on the defense of the state, just as we were in the early days. Russia does not hope to win. The enemy only hopes that we will not stand. Ukraine must stand it. Everything that strengthens us is a priority. This is the only priority, not a single slack. And we will not allow anyone to weaken Ukraine.
Traffic on the main bridge linking the Russian mainland with the Crimean Peninsula has reopened after a temporary suspension. The Russian-installed administration of the annexed peninsula has not disclosed the reason for the suspension. The Crimean Bridge has been a target of increased air and sea drone attacks in recent months. US President Joe Biden is wrapping up his Vietnam visit following the G20 summit in India as he returns to Washington on Tuesday. The visit aimed at strengthening relations with Vietnam in an important effort to counter China's influence in the South China Sea. The talks were focused on semiconductors, artificial intelligence, and critical minerals. The US has been pushing for an upgrade in relations with Vietnam as it sees the Southeast Asian manufacturing dynamo as a key country in its strategy to secure global supply chains from China-related risks. The US says it expects to host China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi soon, with a visit set to take place either at next week's United Nations General Assembly or after it.
As the Secretary said, he extended the invitation to the then Foreign Minister when he was in China. That invitation was accepted. It has since been transferred over to the new Foreign Minister. We expect it to be accepted, and we expect that meeting to take place. But ultimately, we can only, we think it's important to have these conversations, and we will continue to have them, and we expect them to continue to take place. But we can't speak for the Chinese government about when and where they will send their ministers. Those are decisions for them to make.
Singapore-based venture capital firm Vertex Ventures Southeast Asia and India has raised $541 million for its latest and largest fund. That's despite a challenging fundraising environment which continues to weigh on investors and startups. Fund 5 beat an initial target of $450 million. Patrick Falk has more.
Well, the new fund is backed by existing and new limited partners, including Japan Investment Corp, as well as the World Bank's International Finance Corporation. And it comes on the heels of strong returns from its portfolio, which includes successful exits in investments from the likes of Southeast Asia's dominant e-hailing application Grab, as well as Indian logistics service provider Expressbees. Now, Vertex says the new fund, its fifth, is 80% larger than its last, raised in 2019 before COVID set in, and its closing comes amid concerns about rising interest rates and inflation, as well as a slump in tech valuations. And experts say that this signals that investors are still willing to make bets on tech startups despite all these challenges. And the fund is going to be signing off on checks of up to around $8 million to startups focusing on consumer internet, enterprise and financial technology, according to Vertex. It also includes a $50 million vehicle to support startups with female founders.
That's it from me here in London. Back to you, Tanvi, in New Delhi.
Thank you, Julia. Our colleague Julia Chapman reporting to us from London. You're watching DD India Global, still to come on the show. Thousands of people reported dead and missing after Strom Danial lashed eastern Libya. US goes ahead with Iran prisoner swap and release of $6 billion of frozen oil revenues.
Wherever news breaks, whatever it takes.
Connecting corners, cutting across continents.
Stories that matter from across the globe.
Accurate, authentic journalism that serves you right. From politics to glamour, from sports to world affairs. With a fusion of aesthetics and substance. Introducing news in a new avatar. Experience the world through a new lens. Stay tuned to DD India for an exciting journey beyond borders.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Global. I am Tanvi Taneja. Now, nature's fury continues in the north of Africa. Next, news of the devastating floods in Libya. Authorities in Libya are calling for international aid as floods in the port city of Derna have claimed more than 2,000 lives. At least 6,000 people remain missing. Countries including the United Arab Emirates, Turkey, Algeria and Egypt are sending aid to Libya. Political divisions in the war-ravaged country have complicated the aid process. The disaster in Libya has been triggered by Strom Danial.
The latest update regarding the death toll, as the Prime Minister of Libya announced, exceeds 2,000 in Derna city only. May they rest in peace. There are also in Derna thousands of missing people, some 5,000 to 6,000 missing people, and this number could largely increase.
At least 7 people have been killed as the remnants of Typhoon Haikui trigger floods in South China. Guangzhou and Guangdong are among the worst-hit provinces. Emergency workers are racing against time to rescue over 1,300 residents who remain trapped in flooded areas. The city of Yulin alone has recorded over 100 landslides in the last 3 days. Relentless rainfall has destroyed roads, hampering rescue work. More news of weather mayhem. The U.S. National Hurricane Center is warning that Hurricane Lee will bring severe weather conditions to the U.S. East Coast over the next few days. Forecasters say Hurricane Lee is packing winds of almost 200 kilometers per hour despite a reduction in intensity, with the National Hurricane Center warning that it may continue to strengthen over the coming day or so. An American explorer has been rescued from an underground cave system in south of Turkey. Mark Dickey fell ill around 1,000 meters below the surface.
It is amazing to be above ground again. I was underground for far longer than ever expected with an unexpected medical issue. At one point in time, while I was waiting for Jessica to get back down with fluids, she made an insane climb of 1,000 meters out of a cave to come back down another 1,000 meters, along with the support of Hungarians and Turkish cavers. Saved my life, and it was the rapid response of the Turkish government that got the resources to her. Just, what can you say? Saved my life.
In the Indian western state of Gujarat, a total of 108 migrants from Pakistan are going to be awarded Indian citizenship. The citizenship is being given to the people of minority communities from Afghanistan, Bangladesh and Pakistan. As per the Citizenship Act of India, so far nearly 1,149 Pakistani Hindu expatriates have been awarded Indian citizenship in this state. Now, the United States has made a deal with Iran to swap prisoners and release $6 billion in frozen Iranian funds. This has cleared the way for the release of 5 American citizens detained in Iran by issuing a blanket waiver for international banks to transfer $6 billion in frozen Iranian money without the fear of US sanctions. As part of the agreement, the Biden administration has also agreed to release 5 unnamed Iranian nationals detained in the United States. And now let's take a look at other stories making news around the world. A study has revealed that 37% of dog owners in the US consider canine vaccines to be unsafe, while 22% view them as ineffective. 30% owners regard the vaccines unnecessary. The study was conducted by Boston University's School of Public Health in partnership with the market research and data analytics company YouGov. A Swiss-French artist has used eco-friendly paint to create a giant fresco near the United Nations office in Geneva. The fresco is meant to draw attention to the plight of civilians in armed conflicts. The 34-year-old artist has painted a gigantic hand on a grass canvas using chalk and coal. Seen from above, the hand can be seen repairing a monumental wooden sculpture known as the Broken Chair. Russia's Ural Airlines aircraft with 159 people on board made an emergency landing in the western Siberian region. The plane was on its way to Omsk from Sochi. There are no immediate reports of any injuries, and the reason for the emergency landing remains unknown. Germany has announced an additional $21 million in humanitarian aid to Ukraine. During her visit to Kiev, German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock assured support to Ukraine in its war against Russia. Baerbock met President Zelensky and other Ukrainian leaders. She acknowledged Ukraine's request to its Western partners to provide Kiev with more weapons. In a major relief, Philippines Nobel laureate Maria Ressa and her news site Rappler have been acquitted of tax fraud by a trial court. Ressa had earlier been convicted in 2020 for cyber libel in one of the several cases against the website filed by government agencies. She claimed that these cases were politically motivated.
Acquittal now strengthens our resolve to continue with the justice system, to submit ourselves to the court despite the political harassment, despite the attacks on press freedom. It shows that the court system works. And we hope to see the remaining charges dismissed. I mean, we've gone through some of the darkest times. We're not out of the woods yet. Both journalism and democracy is under attack globally. The cameras that are here are threatened by information operations on social media, right? We've seen this not just in the Philippines, but all around the world. So social media has been used to water down facts, to change lies into facts, and now you have generative AI. So it's going to get harder as we move forward.
Now let's set our sights on the moon. We know India's moon mission, Chandrayaan-3, has successfully put India on the moon. DD India correspondent Aisha Khanum spoke to the Indian Space Agency's chairman, ISRO chairman S. Somnath, about his afterthoughts for the mission.
Chandrayaan-3 has put India in a big league, and this is also watched by the scientific community across the world. Now, what have we achieved with this mission, and how the scientists will analyze this data? To talk more about it, I have with me none other than the man who put India on the moon. That is Dr. S. Somnath. How relaxed are you now that the mission is in the sleep mode?
See, for us, we are not relaxed or happy with what we achieved. We want more. Our dil mange more. So what we want to do further is that now it has landed. It has done its scientific work now with those instruments. And we would like to explore more with the lander and the rover. What all we can do today is all going to be the bonus.
Right.
So we will have to extract bonus out of this mission,
right,
of doing things which we never ever thought of.
How big was this task and how big was this test? Why did you take this risk once again?
See, risks are to be taken. Space is like that. If you do not have the courage to take the risk, we are not going to achieve anything. This is a very well understood lesson in space fraternity. So we understand the risks, we understand the success and its all glory.
And you were very confident from the beginning that this soft landing will be successful. So what made you so confident?
See, it is very, very clear. So the confidence comes out of the understanding of what it is. We understood the whole process very well. We had a failure last time to soft lands. So that gave enough of information, data for us to analyze and understand the weakness in the system. And once you understand that, you can always correct it. Say, being a mission on the moon, which is quite different from Earth, the extent of simulation and studies that we could do on Earth were limited. And the number of tests that we could do to complete, to understand those gaps were also limited. So this may be the reason for the failure. And once you understand that, we extended our effort towards creating more simulations, creating the boundary operations, and all that we can dream about, think about, imagine about, were tried.
Right.
So we were really confident that this time it has to do, because not only this time, in the future also it has to land soft very well.
Thank you for talking to us. Thank you so much. With cameraman Uttam, Aisha Khanum, DD India, Bangalore.
And now India is making headway towards its first manned deep ocean mission. As part of India's Samudrayaan mission under the Ministry of Earth Sciences, submersible Matsya will take a dip in the Bay of Bengal next year. Matsya is the Sanskrit word for fish. The aim is to study deep sea resources and biodiversity assessment without disturbing the marine ecosystem. The mission also supports the blue economy vision of India, which envisages sustainable utilization of ocean resources for economic growth. So as ISRO chairman S. Somnath said, India has to take risks, and so it is in its moon mission, sun mission, and now deep sea mission. We wish the people involved in these missions very good luck. So with that, it's a wrap in this edition of DD India Global. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at DD India Live. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Tanvi Taneja from all of us here in New Delhi. Thanks for watching. Namaskar.